The notification ping on my phone shattered my concentration as I prepared Mrs. Henderson's crown fitting. My hands froze over the dental instruments when I read the message from my mother. "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now. Haha." The words hit like a sledgehammer to my chest. 3 months of complete silence after our explosive argument about my engagement to Marcus, and this was Margaret's response. Patients were waiting in the reception area, but I couldn't stop staring at those cruel words. I had sacrificed everything, moved back from California to help with Dad's mounting medical bills, thinking family meant something. Instead, my own mother had just declared war on me. My dental assistant, Sarah, noticed my pale complexion and quietly rescheduled my afternoon appointments. The drive from downtown Columbus to my childhood home in Westerville felt like traveling through a nightmare. Each familiar street corner reminded me of better times when our family gatherings meant laughter instead of warfare. Pulling into the driveway, I stared at the brass locks gleaming new against the faded blue front door. 4 black garbage bags sat on the concrete porch, stuffed with what remained of my belongings. Neighbors peeked through curtains as I fumbled through the bags, finding my college diploma crumpled between winter sweaters and old textbooks. My brother Travis answered on the second ring. "Jeannie, thank God you called. Mom told me some pretty serious things about what you've been doing. What exactly did she tell you?" My voice cracked as I sat on the porch steps, surrounded by the remnants of my life. "She said you've been stealing money from Dad's medical fund, taking advantage of his cancer to line your own pockets." Travis's tone carried disappointment that cut deeper than any physical wound. "Travis, that's completely backwards." I pulled up my banking app, scrolling through 8 months of transfers. "I've been paying Dad's medical bills, every single treatment, every prescription, every specialist appointment. Look, I'll send you screenshots right now." The silence stretched between us as Travis processed what I was saying. But Mom showed me bank statements. She said Dad's medical expenses were handled through his insurance. His insurance was mysteriously canceled last December. I've been covering everything out of my own savings. I forwarded him the electronic receipts from University Hospital's oncology department. I moved back from San Diego, gave up my established practice, there used my entire emergency fund to keep Dad alive. This doesn't make sense. Why would Mom lie about something like this? Because 3 weeks ago, I confronted her about the way she's been treating Marcus. Every family dinner she makes comments about his background, about how he doesn't fit with our family values. When I told her she was being racist and that it needed to stop, she exploded. Travis was quiet for a long moment. "Jeannie, the medical bills you're talking about, Mom specifically told me those were being handled. She said Dad's treatment was covered and that you were stealing money meant for other expenses. Check the dates on my transfers versus what Mom told you. I can prove every payment went directly to Dad's cancer care." I wiped tears from my cheeks as evening shadows began falling across our old neighborhood. "Travis, I sacrificed everything to come back here. My dental practice in California had a 6-month waiting list. I was making 3 times what I earn here. I gave all that up because I thought Dad needed me." Another long pause. "Send me everything, every receipt, every bank statement. Because if what you're saying is true, then Mom has been lying to both of us for months." The evidence I forwarded painted a clear picture. Since December, I had transferred $43,000 to various medical providers. My savings account, once healthy enough to buy a house, had dwindled to less than $2,000. Meanwhile, Margaret had been telling Travis that Dad's medical care was fully covered and that I was somehow stealing from unspecified family funds. "Jeannie, these bank records don't lie, but I don't understand why Mom would make up such a serious accusation." because when I stood up to her racism, she realized she needed a way to turn the family against me. Making me look like a thief was her solution. I stood up from the porch steps, my legs stiff from sitting on concrete. She'd rather destroy my reputation than admit she's been wrong about Marcus. Travis's voice softened. I've been thinking about some things that didn't add up. Last month, Mom insisted Dad's treatment was going great, but when I visited him at the hospital, he looked worse than ever, and she always made excuses for why I couldn't talk to his doctors directly. That's because she doesn't want anyone to know I'm the one actually paying for his care. If you knew the truth, her lies about me stealing money would fall apart instantly. Where are you staying tonight? You can't sleep in your car. I honestly don't know. All my furniture, my whole life, it's sitting in garbage bags like I'm some kind of criminal. I looked around the neighborhood where I had learned to ride a bicycle and sold Girl Scout cookies door to door. The woman who taught me to brush my teeth properly just threw me away like trash. Come stay with Beth and me tonight. We'll figure out what's really happening here. Travis paused. And Jeannie, if you're telling the truth about paying for Dad's medical care, then what you've done is incredible. You saved his life. As I loaded my belongings into my Honda Civic, I realized Margaret's cruelty went deeper than racism or family disagreements. She had calculated exactly how to isolate me from everyone who mattered, turning my greatest sacrifice into evidence of my supposed betrayal. But truth has a way of surfacing, and Travis was starting to see cracks in her carefully constructed lies. 2 mornings later, my phone buzzed with an email marked urgent priority. The sender was Patricia Hendricks' attorney at law, and her message contained only one line: "We have a problem. Call immediately regarding fraudulent insurance claims filed under your provider license." My coffee mug shattered against the kitchen floor of Travis's guest room. Insurance fraud involving my dental license could destroy my entire career, but I had never filed any suspicious claims. With shaking fingers, I dialed Patricia's number. "Dr. Walsh, thank you for calling so quickly. I represent Meridian Insurance Company, and we need to discuss some very serious irregularities in medical claims filed under your provider identification number." "I don't understand. I haven't filed any questionable claims. My practice maintains pristine records." "The fraudulent claims aren't from your dental office. Someone has been filing fake medical claims under your name and license number for the past 18 months. We're talking about $87,000 in fraudulent payments." The room started spinning. "That's impossible. My credentials are secure, and I only practice dentistry, not general medicine." "Dr. Walsh, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. Have you been filing claims for treating patients with cancer-related conditions, diabetes management, and cardiac rehabilitation services?" "Absolutely not. I'm a dentist. I don't treat any of those conditions, and I certainly haven't filed claims for services I'm not qualified to provide." Patricia's tone became more serious. "Someone with access to your professional credentials has been creating false patient records and billing insurance companies for extensive medical treatments. The investigation began when an anonymous tip came in from someone in medical billing who noticed irregularities in claim patterns." My heart stopped. "Did you say someone in medical billing reported this?" "Yes. The tipster noticed that claims filed under your license showed impossible patterns, treating the same patient for both dental procedures and oncology treatments on the same days in different cities. Without this person coming forward, the fraud might have continued indefinitely." Marcus. "My fiancé worked in medical billing for a healthcare consulting firm. He must have spotted the fraudulent activity and reported it to protect me, not knowing how deep the deception ran. Dr. Walsh, there's more. The investigation has revealed that whoever is committing this fraud has also been stealing Social Security payments from an elderly individual named William Walsh. I believe that's your father. Yes, that's my father. He's been battling lymphoma for almost a year now. According to our investigation, someone has been intercepting his Social Security deposits and using forged documents to access his medical benefits while filing false claims under your professional license. This person has intimate knowledge of both your credentials and your father's medical situation. The pieces clicked together like a horrifying puzzle. Margaret had access to both my professional information and Dad's personal details. She could have easily obtained my license number from documents I left at home during my visits, and she had power of attorney over Dad's financial affairs. Ms. Hendricks, I think I know who's responsible for this fraud, but I need to understand something. Am I being charged with a crime? Not yet, but the insurance companies and federal authorities are building a case. If we can't prove you're a victim rather than a perpetrator, you're looking at potential criminal charges and permanent loss of your professional license. What do I need to do to clear my name? First, we need complete documentation of your actual patient records and billing history. Second, we need to identify who has had access to your credentials. Third, we need evidence showing you've been paying legitimate medical expenses out of your own pocket rather than benefiting from fraudulent insurance claims. I can provide all of that. I've been paying my father's actual medical bills directly using my own savings. I have bank records proving every transfer. That's exactly what we need to see. Dr. Walsh, if you're truly a victim here, then someone has orchestrated an elaborate scheme to frame you while stealing from both insurance companies and your father. We need to meet immediately. After hanging up, I stared at the destroyed coffee mug scattered across Travis's kitchen floor. Margaret hadn't just kicked me out of the house and turned my family against me. She had been systematically destroying my professional life while committing federal crimes under my identity. The cruelty of her text message suddenly seemed like the smallest piece of a much larger, more sinister puzzle. I called Marcus, reaching his voicemail. Marcus, it's me. I know you reported those fraudulent insurance claims, and you probably saved my career by doing it. But we have a bigger problem than either of us realized. The person committing the fraud is someone in my own family. As I swept up the broken ceramic pieces, I realized Margaret's war on me had been planned for months. Every cruel word, every racist comment about Marcus, every attempt to isolate me from family support had been building toward this moment. She hadn't just stolen money, she had tried to steal my entire future. But Patricia Hendricks had given me hope. Truth backed by evidence could unravel even the most sophisticated deception. Margaret had made one crucial mistake. In her elaborate scheme, she had underestimated how much documentation I maintained and how thoroughly Marcus understood medical billing patterns. The fight for my life was just beginning, but for the first time since receiving that devastating text message, I felt like I might actually win. University Hospital's intensive care unit smelled of antiseptic and fear when I rushed through the automatic doors. Travis had called 15 minutes earlier with panic in his voice. Dad had collapsed at home and was being admitted with severe complications from his lymphoma treatment. Nurse Supervisor Janet Morrison intercepted me at the nurses' station, her expression grave. Dr. Walsh, I need to speak with you privately about your father's medication compliance. We stepped into an empty consultation room where Janet closed the door carefully. Someone has been very inconsistent about picking up William's prescriptions. Sometimes they collect his medications on schedule. Other times they skip 2 or 3 weeks entirely. That doesn't make sense. His treatment protocol requires precise timing for maximum effectiveness. Exactly. And when medications are picked up, it's not always the same person. Sometimes it's a woman matching your mother's description. Sometimes it's a man we don't recognize. The pharmacy staff has noted these irregularities, but couldn't reach your father directly to discuss the issue. My stomach dropped. What happens when someone skips chemotherapy medications for weeks at a time? The cancer progresses aggressively. Missing doses allows tumors to regain strength and can make subsequent treatments less effective. Janet pulled out a thick medical folder. Your father's condition has deteriorated much faster than his original prognosis suggested. Dr. Chen was initially optimistic about his response to treatment, but the irregular medication compliance has complicated everything. I found Dad in room 417, hooked up to multiple monitors and IV lines. His face, once round and healthy, had become gaunt and gray. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. Jeannie, honey, your mother told me you went back to California. She said you'd given up on our family and moved in with that boyfriend of yours. Dad, I never went anywhere. I've been living 20 minutes away working downtown. Mom kicked me out of the house 3 days ago. I sat beside his bed, taking his frail hand in mine. She told you I abandoned you. She said you were angry about my medical bills and didn't want the financial burden anymore, that you'd found someone who could support you better than our family could. The cruelty of Margaret's deception was breathtaking. While I had been secretly financing his survival, she had convinced him I had abandoned him entirely. Dad, I need to show you something important. I pulled up my banking app and scrolled through 8 months of medical payments. Every treatment, every prescription, every specialist appointment you've had since last December. I've been paying for all of it. Your insurance was canceled, and I've been covering your medical expenses out of my own savings. William stared at the screen, his breathing becoming labored. But Margaret told me insurance was handling everything. She said the treatments were fully covered. She lied to both of us. I've spent my entire emergency fund keeping you alive, and she's been telling you that I abandoned the family. Tears ran down his cheeks. Jeannie, I've been rationing my pain medication because Margaret said insurance wouldn't approve higher doses. I thought I was being a burden on everyone. You've been rationing medication. The implications hit me like lightning. Dad, that's incredibly dangerous with your condition. 6 months ago, Margaret convinced me to sign over power of attorney. She said it would make handling medical paperwork easier while I was sick. I thought I was helping. Travis arrived as Dad was explaining the power of attorney situation. My brother's face was pale with exhaustion and growing anger. Dad, what exactly did Mom tell you about signing those papers? She said, with Jeannie gone, someone needed to handle my financial affairs legally, that the power of attorney would protect everyone if I became too sick to make decisions. Travis and I exchanged horrified looks. Margaret hadn't just stolen money. She had legally positioned herself to control every aspect of Dad's life while systematically poisoning his relationship with both of his children. Dad, I need to tell you something else, Travis said, sitting on the other side of the hospital bed. Mom has been telling me that Jeannie was stealing from your medical fund. She convinced me that Jeannie was taking advantage of your cancer for her own benefit. That's the opposite of reality, I said, pulling up more bank records. Travis, look at these dates. Every time Dad was in the hospital, every time he needed emergency treatment, I made immediate transfers to cover the costs. William closed his eyes, the weight of Margaret's deception clearly overwhelming him. I've been letting myself suffer because I thought you both had given up on me. I've been refusing treatments because I believed I was bankrupting the family. The three of us sat in stunned silence as the scope of Margaret's manipulation became clear. She had isolated each of us from the others, feeding us different lies designed to destroy our relationships while she maintained legal and financial control. "There's something else," William whispered. 3 weeks ago, Margaret brought some loan papers to the hospital. She said we needed to borrow against the house to cover medical expenses that insurance wouldn't handle. I signed them because I was so scared of being a burden. "Dad, what kind of loan papers?" Travis asked urgently. "I don't know exactly. Margaret said it was just a temporary measure to handle unexpected costs." My phone rang. Patricia Hendricks calling back. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Dr. Walsh, our investigation has uncovered additional problems. Your mother has taken out a $60,000 home equity loan against your father's property using forged signatures. The money was withdrawn immediately and transferred to accounts we're still tracing. She's been systematically stealing from him while convincing him that I abandoned the family. There's more. We've discovered that your mother's boyfriend, Harold Masterson, has a criminal record for elder financial abuse in 3 other states. This appears to be part of a larger pattern." Harold. Margaret had never mentioned dating anyone new. She had been hiding an entire relationship while orchestrating the destruction of our family's finances and relationships. Dr. Walsh time is critical here. If your father passes away before we can gather evidence of the fraud, it becomes much harder to prove your innocence in the insurance scheme. I looked back through the hospital room door at Dad hooked up to machines that were keeping him alive, while Margaret's deception had prevented him from getting proper care for months. The woman who had given birth to me was literally killing her own husband for money while framing me for her crimes. "Ms. Hendricks, what do we need to do right now to stop her?" "Document everything. Get your father's testimony about the power of attorney and loan documents. Record any communications with your mother and pray that we can build a case before she disappears with the money." As I hung up the phone, I realized Margaret's cruelty had been even more calculated than I imagined. She hadn't just kicked me out of the house. She had been setting me up to take the blame for her crimes while she slowly killed Dad and planned to vanish with stolen money. But she had made one crucial miscalculation. Dad was still alive. Travis was starting to see through her lies, and I had documentation proving my innocence. The war she had started was about to become a fight for all of our lives. Attorney Patricia Hendricks's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Columbus high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Scioto River. Travis and I sat across from her mahogany desk while she spread out investigative documents that would change everything we thought we knew about Margaret's crimes. The insurance fraud investigation led us to discover something much larger. Patricia began sliding a thick folder across the desk. "Your mother's boyfriend, Harold Masterson, has been running a multi-state elder abuse scheme. Margaret isn't his first victim. She's his accomplice." I opened the folder to find police reports from Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon. Harold's mugshot stared back at me, a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that masked his predatory nature. Harold specifically targets recently widowed or divorced women over 50 who have adult children with successful careers, Patricia continued. He convinces them that their children are stealing from them, then coaches them on how to commit insurance fraud and identity theft using their children's professional credentials. Travis leaned forward, studying Harold's criminal history. "How long has he been doing this?" 8 years, that we can prove. He's stolen over $400,000 from 6 different families. In each case, he convinced the mother that her successful child was the real criminal, positioning himself as the protector while systematically draining family assets. "So Margaret actually believes I've been stealing from Dad?" I asked, trying to process this information. "Initially, yes. Harold is extremely skilled at psychological manipulation. He likely spent months convincing your mother that your educational success and career advancement meant you looked down on the family. He would have gradually planted seeds of doubt about your motivations for moving back home." Patricia pulled out a second folder containing recorded phone conversations. "We've been monitoring Harold's communications for 3 weeks. Yesterday, our private investigator, Dennis, captured recordings of Harold coaching your mother on the next phase of their plan." She pressed play on a digital recorder. Harold's smooth voice filled the office. "Margaret, the insurance money from Jeannie's license is just the beginning. Once we sell the house and liquidate William's remaining accounts, we can disappear to Nevada, where I have business connections. Nobody will be able to trace us." Margaret's voice responded, "But what about William? He's getting sicker, and the doctors are asking more questions." "That's actually working in our favor. When he passes, all the insurance claims become closed cases. Jeannie will be left holding the bag for fraud she can't prove she didn't commit." My hands trembled as Harold's voice continued. "You've done everything perfectly. Getting William to sign over power of attorney, convincing him that Jeannie abandoned the family, isolating her from Travis. Now we just need to wait for the natural conclusion and collect our final payments." Travis stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "They're planning to let Dad die while framing Jeannie for their crimes. Margaret, our own mother, is planning to kill her husband for money." "There's more," Patricia said grimly. "Dennis discovered that Harold has been supplying your mother with expired chemotherapy medications obtained from black market medical suppliers. Your father's rapid deterioration isn't entirely from missed treatments. He's been receiving medications that have lost their effectiveness." The room spun around me. "You're saying they've been poisoning him?" "Not poisoning exactly, but giving him medications that can't fight his cancer. It's a slower method than outright murder, but it accomplishes the same goal while generating maximum insurance claims for intensive treatment that isn't actually helping." Patricia handed me another document. "William's original oncologist, Dr. Chen, reviewed his case yesterday. With proper medication, your father's lymphoma should have been in remission months ago. His current condition is the direct result of receiving ineffective treatments." "Can we save him?" I asked, wiping tears from my cheeks. "Dr. Torres at James Cancer Center has agreed to take William's case immediately. With proper chemotherapy drugs and aggressive treatment, there's still hope for significant improvement." Travis returned to his seat, his jaw set with determination. "What do we need to do to stop Harold and Margaret?" "We need evidence of the medication tampering, and we need your mother to reveal Harold's location. He's been careful to stay mobile, never maintaining a permanent address for more than a few weeks." "How do we get that evidence without putting Dad at greater risk?" Patricia smiled for the first time since our meeting began. "That's where Dennis's investigative skills become invaluable. He's been tracking Harold's movements and discovered where he's been storing the fraudulent medical supplies. Tomorrow morning, federal agents will raid the storage facility while simultaneously arresting Margaret." "Will they be able to get Harold to—" "That depends on whether Margaret decides to cooperate or protect him. Based on our recordings, Harold has been planning to abandon her anyway once they've extracted maximum value from your family's assets." I looked out at the river, watching boats navigate the calm water below. Just 4 days earlier, I had been a successful dentist planning my wedding and helping my family through a medical crisis. Now I understood that my entire life had been systematically dismantled by criminals who saw us as nothing more than financial targets. Patricia, there's one thing I don't understand. If Harold has done this before, why target our family specifically? Dennis believes Harold met your mother through an online support group for families dealing with cancer. He studied your family dynamics for months before making his move, learning about your dental practice, Marcus's job in medical billing, and your father's medical situation. So he knew exactly how to use my professional credentials for insurance fraud. And he knew that Marcus's expertise in medical billing would eventually expose the fraud, allowing them to frame you as the mastermind while positioning themselves as victims. Travis stood up again, this time with purpose instead of agitation. What can we do to help with tomorrow's arrests? Be prepared for Margaret to contact you with elaborate explanations or desperate lies. She may claim Harold forced her cooperation or that she was protecting the family from some imaginary threat. Don't believe anything she says and record every conversation. As we left Patricia's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, hope backed by evidence and professional support. Harold and Margaret had made one critical error in their sophisticated scheme. They had underestimated how much documentation I maintained and how thoroughly investigators could trace their crimes once the fraud was exposed. The war, Margaret declared with her cruel text message, was about to end, but not the way she had planned. Tomorrow would bring justice for Dad and vindication for me. The woman who had tried to destroy my life was about to learn that truth when properly documented and professionally presented always defeats even the most elaborate deception. Margaret's phone call came at 6 a.m, 2 hours before the planned arrests. Her voice carried a panic I had never heard before, high-pitched and desperate in a way that made my skin crawl. "Jeannie, we need to meet immediately. Harold told me some things about you that I need to verify before calling the police." I had prepared for this conversation, following Patricia's advice to record everything while revealing nothing about the investigation. "What kind of things, Mom?" "He has evidence that you've been stealing money from your father's medical accounts. Bank records showing transfers you made using forged authorizations." The audacity was breathtaking. Margaret was describing her own crimes while trying to pin them on me. "Mom, I think you should speak with a lawyer before making serious accusations." "I don't need a lawyer. I need you to explain why you've been taking money meant for your father's cancer treatment." "I'll meet with you, but only if we can include Travis and Dad in the conversation. If there are allegations about financial impropriety, the whole family should hear them." Margaret's hesitation lasted several seconds too long. "That's not necessary. This is between you and me." "No, Mom. If you're accusing me of stealing from Dad, then Dad needs to be part of resolving this situation. Harold says involving too many people will just complicate things. He thinks we should handle this privately." "I'll meet you at the Columbus police station downtown. If you have evidence of criminal activity, that's the appropriate place to present it." "You're being ridiculous. We can meet at the house and work this out as a family." "The house where you changed the locks and threw my belongings in garbage bags? I don't think so." Margaret's voice became shrill. "Jeannie, I'm trying to help you here. If Harold goes to the police with what he knows, you could go to prison. I'm offering you a chance to explain yourself before that happens." "Then let's all go to the police together. You, me, Harold, Travis, and Dad. We can present all the evidence and let professionals sort out what really happened." "Harold is very upset about what he discovered. He doesn't trust the local police to handle this appropriately." The conversation was becoming surreal. Margaret was protecting a man she had known for less than a year while accusing her daughter of crimes she herself had committed. "Mom, do you actually believe I've been stealing from Dad?" "I don't know what to believe anymore. Harold showed me bank records with your signature on authorizations I never saw before." Bring those records to the police station. If my signature was forged, that's a serious federal crime that needs to be investigated properly." Margaret hung up without responding. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. "This is Detective Sandra Coleman with Columbus Police. Ma'am, your mother, Margaret Walsh, is here at our station requesting to file charges against you for elder financial abuse and insurance fraud." "Detective Coleman, I've been working with attorney Patricia Hendricks on this exact situation. There are federal investigations already underway." "Yes, we've been briefed by federal agents. Your mother has brought someone with her who claims to have evidence of your criminal activity." "Harold." Margaret had brought Harold directly to the police, not realizing they were walking into a trap that had been set for weeks. "We'd like you to come in to answer questions about the allegations, Dr. Walsh." "I'll be there within 30 minutes. Travis met me in the police station parking lot carrying a folder full of Dad's medical records and my bank statements. "Jeannie, are you ready for this?" "I've been ready since the day she kicked me out of the house." Detective Coleman escorted us to an interview room where Margaret sat beside a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and expensive clothes. Harold Masterson looked exactly like his mugshot, but his demeanor was confident and professional. "Detective, this is my daughter, Jeannie," Margaret said, her voice cold. "Harold has evidence that she's been stealing from our family using her dental license to file false insurance claims." Harold opened a briefcase and pulled out documents that looked official but felt wrong. "Dr. Walsh, can you explain these authorization forms with your signature approving medical treatments you're not qualified to provide?" I examined the papers carefully. The signatures looked like mine, but the letterhead was from a medical practice I had never heard of. "These signatures are forgeries. I've never seen these documents before." "That's exactly what someone would say if they were caught committing fraud," Harold replied smoothly. Detective Coleman intervened. "Mr. Masterson, thank you for bringing this information to our attention. However, I need to inform you that you're under arrest for insurance fraud, elder abuse, and operating a criminal enterprise across multiple states." Harold's confident expression vanished instantly. "I beg your pardon. We've been investigating your activities for several weeks. Federal agents are currently raiding your storage facility, where you've been keeping expired medical supplies and forged documents." Margaret stared at Harold in confusion as Detective Coleman continued reading his rights. "Harold, what is she talking about? What storage facility?" "Margaret, don't say anything else without a lawyer present," Harold warned, but his voice had lost all authority. "Mr. Masterson, your phone conversations with Mrs. Walsh over the past 3 weeks have been recorded as part of a federal investigation. We have evidence of you coaching her on insurance fraud and planning to abandon her once you'd stolen sufficient funds from her family." Margaret's face went white. "Harold, is that true? Have you been lying to me about Jeannie?" Harold tried to stand up, but Detective Coleman firmly guided him back into his chair. "Mrs. Walsh, your daughter has been paying for your husband's medical care out of her own savings for 8 months. The fraud charges you're alleging against her are actually crimes you committed under Mr. Masterson's direction." "That's impossible. Harold showed me evidence that Jeannie was stealing money." "The evidence Mr. Masterson showed you was fabricated. Dr. Walsh has documentation proving she spent over $40,000 of her personal funds on legitimate medical expenses for your husband." Margaret looked at Harold with growing horror. "You told me Jeannie was taking advantage of William's illness. You said she was using his cancer to steal money. Ma'am, Mr. Masterson has used identical lies with 6 other families in 4 states. His pattern is to convince mothers that their successful children are stealing from them, then coach the mothers on committing fraud while he collects the majority of stolen funds." Harold finally spoke, his voice desperate. Margaret, remember what we discussed about sticking to our story. Our story, Margaret's voice cracked. What story, Harold? I thought we were exposing a crime, not committing one. Detective Coleman placed a stack of documents on the table. Mrs. Walsh, these are recordings of your conversations with Mr. Masterson discussing plans to let your husband die while maximizing insurance claims. You also discussed selling your house and fleeing to Nevada once you'd stolen sufficient funds. Margaret stared at the transcripts, her hands shaking as she read her own words. Harold, you told me those conversations were about protecting the family from Jeannie's theft. You said we were gathering evidence to stop her. Margaret, I need you to understand something clearly, Detective Coleman said gently. Mr. Masterson has been manipulating your perceptions for months. Your daughter never stole anything. She sacrificed her savings to keep your husband alive, while Mr. Masterson convinced you she was the enemy. The moment when Margaret finally understood the truth was devastating to witness. Her face crumpled as the full scope of Harold's manipulation became clear. She had been weaponized against her own family while believing she was protecting them. Harold, how could you do this to us? She whispered. But Harold was already being led away in handcuffs, his sophisticated manipulation scheme finally exposed. He had underestimated the power of documented evidence and professional investigation to unravel even the most elaborate deception. Margaret sat alone at the table, surrounded by evidence of crimes she had committed while believing she was fighting for justice. The cruelty of her text message and the months of lies suddenly seemed tragic rather than malicious. She had been a victim of manipulation, but her victimhood didn't erase the damage she had caused. The trap had sprung perfectly, but justice felt more complex than simple victory. Margaret's betrayal of our family was real, but it had been orchestrated by someone who saw us all as nothing more than financial targets. 3 days later, Dr. Kevin Torres emerged from his consultation with Dad, carrying the most shocking news yet. His expression was grave as he sat down with Travis, Margaret, and me in the family conference room at James Cancer Center. I've completed a comprehensive review of William's medical history, and I need to share some disturbing findings with all of you. Margaret had been released on bond pending trial, her cooperation with the investigation earning her limited freedom, while Harold remained in federal custody. She sat apart from Travis and me, the weight of her deception creating a chasm that might never heal. William's original diagnosis was stage 2 lymphoma with an excellent prognosis, Dr. Torres began. With proper treatment, he should have achieved remission within 6 months. His current deteriorated condition is not consistent with the natural progression of his cancer. What are you saying, Doctor? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Someone has been systematically sabotaging William's treatment by substituting his prescribed chemotherapy medications with expired or incorrect drugs. This has allowed his cancer to progress while creating the appearance of intensive treatment for insurance purposes. Margaret gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. That's impossible. I picked up his medications exactly as prescribed. Dr. Torres opened a thick medical file. The medications you've been collecting from the pharmacy are legitimate. However, laboratory analysis of William's blood work shows metabolites consistent with expired chemotherapy drugs that have lost their therapeutic effectiveness. How is that possible? Travis asked. Someone with access to William's daily medications has been substituting the real drugs with expired versions, then selling the legitimate medications on the black market. This explains why William's condition deteriorated so rapidly despite supposedly receiving proper treatment. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Margaret had not just been stealing money. She had been slowly killing Dad while believing she was helping him. "Dr. Torres, can my father recover from this?" I asked. "With immediate proper treatment, using legitimate medications, William's prognosis is actually quite good. The cancer has progressed, but not beyond the point of effective intervention." Margaret began crying quietly. "I thought Harold was helping me give William the best care possible. He said the medications he provided were higher quality than what insurance would cover." "Mrs. Walsh, the expired drugs you were unknowingly giving your husband have been traced to a black market medical supply operation run by Harold Masterson. He convinced you that substituting medications was beneficial while actually undermining William's treatment for financial gain." Dr. Torres continued his explanation. "Harold's scheme was particularly sophisticated because it generated multiple revenue streams. He collected insurance payments for expensive treatments, sold the legitimate medications to black market buyers, and positioned himself to inherit assets when William inevitably died from inadequate care." "How long before we can start proper treatment?" I asked. "William is strong enough to begin immediately. We'll need to flush the expired drugs from his system and restart with current chemotherapy protocols. I'm optimistic about his chances for a full recovery." The irony was overwhelming. Dad's near-death condition, which had seemed like evidence of terminal illness, was actually proof that he could survive with proper care. Margaret's manipulation had brought him to the brink of death, but it had also revealed that recovery was possible. "Dr. Torres, there's something I need to understand," Margaret said through her tears. "Harold told me that Jeannie was stealing money meant for William's care. How was I supposed to know he was lying?" "Mrs. Walsh, your daughter's bank records show she personally paid for every legitimate medical expense your husband incurred. She spent over $40,000 of her own money ensuring he received proper care through official medical channels." Margaret looked at me for the first time since the arrests. "Jeannie, I'm so sorry. Harold convinced me that your success meant you looked down on our family. He said you were using William's illness to steal money while pretending to help. Mom, why did you believe a stranger over your own daughter? Because he seemed to understand things about our family that you never talked about. He said you'd always been jealous of how much attention William's illness was getting, and that you were using your dental license to steal from insurance companies." Travis leaned forward. Margaret didn't, it seem, suspicious when Harold started providing medications from unofficial sources. He said insurance companies deliberately provided lower quality drugs to save money, and that families with resources should get better treatment for their loved ones. It seemed like he was trying to help. Dr. Torres handed Margaret a detailed report. The medications Harold provided were not just expired. They were specifically chosen to maintain the appearance of treatment while ensuring maximum disease progression. This wasn't medical error. It was calculated murder. Margaret stared at the report, her face pale. "I've been slowly killing my own husband while thinking I was saving his life." "Mrs. Walsh, you were manipulated by someone with extensive experience in elder abuse. Harold studied your family for months before approaching you, learning exactly which emotional vulnerabilities to exploit. But that doesn't excuse what I did to Jeannie. I threw her out of the house, spread lies about her stealing money, tried to turn Travis against her. I destroyed our family based on lies from a criminal." The conversation was interrupted by Dad's nurse, who informed us that William was awake and asking to speak with all of us together. We found him sitting up in bed, looking more alert than he had in months. "The doctor explained everything to me," he said quietly. "Margaret, I understand that you thought you were helping me, but Jeannie, I owe you my life." Dad reached for my hand. "You sacrificed everything to keep me alive, and I let Margaret convince me that you'd abandoned us. I'm ashamed of doubting you. Dad, what matters now is getting you healthy again. There's something else I need to say. William looked directly at Margaret. I remember Harold visiting when I was very sick, bringing medications, and talking about how families need to stick together against outsiders who don't understand our values. Margaret nodded. He was very convincing about protecting family loyalty. But he was talking about Jeannie and Marcus as the outsiders. He said mixed-race relationships showed that Jeannie didn't respect our family's heritage. The final piece of Harold's manipulation became clear. He had not just exploited financial vulnerabilities. He had deliberately inflamed racial prejudices to turn Margaret against my relationship with Marcus. Harold used your existing concerns about change and difference to convince you that I was the enemy, I realized. He took whatever small doubts you had and amplified them into complete distrust. Margaret buried her face in her hands. I let a stranger destroy our family by telling me what I was afraid might be true. I chose to believe lies because they confirmed my worst suspicions instead of trusting the daughter who was actually saving her father's life. Dr. Torres returned with William's treatment schedule. We'll begin intensive therapy immediately, but I want all of you to understand that family support will be crucial for William's recovery. Stress and emotional conflict can undermine medical treatment. As we left the hospital that evening, Margaret walked beside me for the first time in months. Jeannie, I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to spend whatever time I have left making amends for the damage I caused. Mom, the important thing now is helping Dad get better and making sure Harold faces justice for what he did to our family. And I need to testify against him so other families don't go through what we've experienced. The revelation that Dad could recover completely changed everything. What had seemed like a story about terminal illness and family betrayal was actually a story about how criminal manipulation could be overcome through truth evidence and the courage to seek justice. Harold had made one fatal miscalculation in his elaborate scheme. He had assumed that family love, once poisoned by lies and manipulation, could never recover. But truth, when properly documented and professionally supported, had the power to heal even the deepest betrayals. Justice was finally within reach, but more importantly, our family was beginning the difficult work of rebuilding trust based on honesty rather than the convenient lies that had nearly destroyed us all. 6 months after that devastating text message changed my life forever. I stood in Dad's backyard, watching him plant tomatoes in the garden he thought he'd never see again. His cancer was in complete remission. His strength had returned, and his laughter filled the spring air as Travis's kids helped him dig holes for the seedlings. Margaret had pleaded guilty to insurance fraud and received a 7-year sentence reduced because of her cooperation in Harold's prosecution. Harold himself was serving 15 years in federal prison for running the multi-state elder abuse operation. The investigation had uncovered 7 other families he had victimized, stealing over $600,000 through identical manipulation schemes. Jeannie, Dr. Torres wants to see you in his office next week. Dad said, brushing soil from his hands. He's starting a support group for families who've survived elder abuse, and he thinks your experience could help other people. I'd be honored to participate, I replied, adjusting my engagement ring as Marcus approached, carrying a tray of lemonade. Mrs. Henderson from your dental practice called, Marcus said, handing me a glass. She wants to schedule her crown fitting for next Thursday. She said she's been bragging to everyone about having a dentist who exposed a criminal fraud ring. My new dental practice in Westerville had grown rapidly, partly due to notoriety from the criminal case, but mostly because I specialized in treating cancer patients whose oral health had been compromised by chemotherapy. The experience with Dad's illness had given me unique insights into the dental complications that cancer patients face. Travis called this morning, Dad continued. He's speaking at the Ohio Association of Elder Care Advocates Conference next month about recognizing signs of financial manipulation in families dealing with medical crises. Travis had become passionate about elder abuse prevention after witnessing how easily Harold had manipulated our family dynamics. His presentations combined personal experience with practical advice for protecting vulnerable relatives from financial predators. Has Margaret written to you recently? Marcus asked, settling into a lawn chair beside me. She writes every week, mostly apologizing and sharing what she's learning in prison counseling programs. She's participating in a rehabilitation program for people who were manipulated into committing crimes against their own families. The letters from Margaret were difficult to read, but important for understanding how sophisticated Harold's psychological manipulation had been. He had studied our family for months before making contact, learning exactly which emotional vulnerabilities to exploit. What she did was terrible, but she was genuinely convinced that you were the criminal, Dad said thoughtfully. Harold's manipulation was so thorough that she believed helping him was the same as protecting me. That doesn't excuse the cruelty, but it helps explain how someone could turn so completely against their own child. I agreed. Marcus took my hand, running his thumb over the engagement ring we had finally been able to celebrate properly. When do you think she'll be eligible for parole? 4 years if she maintains good behavior and completes all the counseling requirements. The judge emphasized that her sentence reflected both her crimes and her status as a manipulation victim. Will you be ready to see her again when that time comes? I looked across the garden at Dad, healthy and vibrant, and planting vegetables for a future he nearly didn't have. I think by then, all of us will be ready for whatever healing is possible. Travis arrived with his family for our weekly Sunday dinner, a tradition we had established after Dad's recovery. His wife, Beth, carried a casserole while their children ran straight to the garden to help their grandfather with his planting. Any word on when Harold's trial for the other families will begin? Travis asked. Patricia Hendricks says probably next fall. The federal prosecutors are building cases for each family he victimized, and they want to ensure maximum sentences for all the charges. Good. That man destroyed lives across multiple states by exploiting people's love for their families. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself marveling at how completely our lives had transformed. 6 months ago, I had been alone and accused of crimes I never committed, watching Dad die from supposedly incurable cancer while my family turned against me. Now, Dad was healthy. Our family relationships had been rebuilt on foundations of truth rather than manipulation, and I was using my experience to help other families avoid similar tragedies. Jeannie, there's something I want to say to everyone while we're all together, Dad announced as we gathered around the dinner table. We quieted, giving him our full attention. 6 months ago, I thought I was dying of cancer while my family was falling apart around me. I believed lies about people I loved, and I let manipulation destroy my faith in my own daughter. Dad's voice grew stronger. But this experience taught me that truth, when supported by evidence and courage, can overcome even the most sophisticated deception. Jeannie saved my life twice, once by paying for my medical care, and again by refusing to give up when everything seemed hopeless. He raised his glass of lemonade. To second chances, to the power of documented truth, and of family bonds strong enough to survive even criminal manipulation. As we shared that toast, I reflected on the lessons I'd learned through the most difficult period of my life. Real family loyalty means protecting each other through honesty, not blind acceptance of comfortable lies. Standing up to cruelty, even from people you love, is sometimes the greatest act of family devotion possible. The message that had nearly destroyed me, "We changed all the locks, you don't have a home anymore," had ultimately led to saving Dad's life and exposing crimes that were destroying other families across the country. Margaret's cruelty had been real and devastating, but it had also been the first crack in Harold's carefully constructed facade. Justice prevailed not through revenge or retaliation, but through careful documentation, professional investigation, and the courage to seek truth, even when lies seemed easier to believe. The most important lesson I learned was that protecting family sometimes requires fighting against family members who have been deceived into becoming weapons against their own loved ones. As the sun set over Dad's garden, I realized that home had never been about locks on doors or buildings where I kept my belongings. Home was about people who chose truth over convenient lies, evidence over emotional manipulation, and love over fear. Harold had tried to steal our family's financial assets, but his greatest crime was attempting to steal our capacity to trust and support each other. His failure to destroy that trust permanently was our ultimate victory. The woman who sent that cruel text message was serving time in prison, learning to recognize how her own fears and prejudices had been weaponized against the people she should have protected. The daughter who received that message was building a new life dedicated to preventing other families from experiencing similar betrayals. 6 months after the worst day of my life, I had learned that the deepest healing comes not from forgetting painful experiences, but from using those experiences to protect others and rebuild relationships on foundations strong enough to withstand future storms. Now, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace in your family and standing up for what's right? How did you handle a situation where someone you loved was being manipulated or deceived? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else facing a similar challenge. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding justice. Share this with someone who might need to hear that truth, and courage can overcome even the most sophisticated deception. Thank you for listening to my story. May you always have the wisdom to recognize manipulation, the courage to seek truth, and the strength to protect the people you love, even when that protection requires difficult choices. Until next time, remember that real family loyalty sometimes means fighting for each other against forces that would divide and destroy you.